I'm happy to say that my father really enjoyed Bibliomaniac. It was his favourite book that I've written. This is a book about him, because it was his passion for books that put a spell on me and led to my love of books too. It was the vital connection between us. Sadly, he will not read my next book. He died a few months after Bibliomaniac was first published. The last time he left his house was to see me talking at the Chorleywood bookshop. He sat in a comfy chair in the front row, and when the owner introduced me, telling the audience that I'd recently been awarded Author of the Year by the Bookseller Association, my father loudly remarked, "I don't know why." It was a typical move by him. He was proud of his children, but public displays made him a bit embarrassed. As my father became less mobile in his last years, I became his surrogate browser of the outside world. On tour, I'd always be seeking out books that I thought would delight him, which was also always a good excuse for a phone call. The last book I delivered to him was a biography of the actor Robert Donat, whose films we watched together many times, in particular The 39 Steps and Goodbye Mr. Chips. Returning from the Larne Festival, another weekend of authors and book browsing with my friend Jeff, who you'll find out more about in this book, I went over to stay with my dad. In fact, one of my regrets is I didn't realise it would be the last time that I'd make him a risotto. And unfortunately, the mice that lived in the house had eaten most of the arborio rice, so I had to make him quite a disappointing risotto with brown rice. That's an extra, by the way. That's not in the preface to the book, but just so you know, I still feel that I let him down with a disappointing final risotto. Had I known it was the final risotto, I'd have probably gone and bought some arborio rice. The next morning, I was woken by him calling for help. Entering the bedroom, I think he was worried that he was having a heart attack. Actually, the pain in his chest turned out to be pneumonia, but we didn't know that then. I rubbed some cooling gel on his back, and when my sister returned, I popped into London for a book launch at John Sandoe Books. I'm not very good at those kind of social occasions, but this was for Sarah Bakewell, an author I admired greatly, and my dad always enjoyed stories of these literary events that he could no longer take part in himself. Rather than returning to his home after the wine and cheese straws, I ended up going straight to Stoke Mandeville Hospital, where he now lay on a stretcher bed in a corridor. In between my father's bouts of wakefulness, I read Raymond Chandler's The Big Sleep, with a particularly vivid cover of a corpse in some orchids, who I've since found out is an artist called Tom Adams, who does the most amazing work also on Agatha Christie books. By dawn, my dad's hypnagogic dreams and his stretcher bed reality had become confused. He told me, "It was roast pheasant last night, and I think it will be roast pheasant again today." I suggest it was more likely to be a tray with an egg and cress sandwich on, and possibly a small yoghurt. Over the first 3 days, the prognosis was neither good nor bad. But he was 92, and a body at war in its 10th decade is often short of supplies. I popped down to Devon for a few days with my wife's family, but within 12 hours of arriving, I was summoned back. For the last 24 hours, his consciousness had faded, and so we all sat around his hospital bed and read from his favourite book, Tarka the Otter by Henry Williamson. It was the 1st of April, and we hoped that he might make it to the 2nd, as Fool's Day is just a day of death that wouldn't have suited him, and also then we'd have to ring people again the day after and say that it hadn't been an April Fool and he really was dead. And fortunately, he did make it to midday on the 2nd of April. And then the hymness of him was gone. The reading of books together, of Tarka and also The Hobbit, and the mid-1940s novelisation of a favourite film of all of us, Powell and Pressburger's A Matter of Life and Death, created a ritual over that last few hours. His birthday present arrived too late to be read. Another 1940s novelisation of a Powell and Pressburger, I Know Where I'm Going. In the last 2 years, he kept telling me that he decided to stop ordering any books because I don't have time for all the books I've got already, and so it's just silly to get new ones. And then, of course, he was a bibliomaniac too. So at least twice a week, I'd return from his letterbox and say, "Oh, Dad, I know you're not ordering new books, but 2 parcels have arrived and they're very much in the shape of books." He still couldn't resist. Really, pretty much to his dying day. His last purchase was a book called 103 Not Out from the lovely little independent publisher, The Fleece Press. It's a book about the 103 Royal Mail stamps designed by David Gentleman, with an unfranked copy of every one of those stamps within its pages. I wrote this while taking a break from sorting my dad's books. It's taking time because everyone must be scrutinised for things that might lie within. I pulled out a copy of a hefty historical romance in the Angelique series. Now, if you don't know the Angelique series, they were very popular in the 1950s and I think into the 1960s. They're predominantly about a young blonde woman who more often than not falls in love with an untrustworthy duke. But on this occasion, she fell in love with possibly an untrustworthy French king. It's the book Angelique and the King. I thought it would make the charity donations pile, but then I opened it. Handwritten on the first page was, "Pam, for the best 365 days of my life so far, Nigel." This was his first wedding anniversary, the paper anniversary, gift to my mum, and so it stays. Within 2 days, I'd already collected 74 bookmarks. Some of them were bookmarks of cathedrals embossed on leather. Some of them had little tassels on them. Many of them were cardboard page reminders from the charities he supported. There is a story in the bookmarks before we even start scanning our eyes over the books. The ritual of his death, the memories of his life are often bound, some paperback, some hardback. When I was at Westwood Books recently, we talked to the things that fall from books. Once they discovered that a long-forgotten bookmark inside a volume of botany was actually a cheque from Charles Darwin. They also received many books that had once been owned by Nicole, a young woman who died far too soon. In every book, she wrote where she bought it from. Then, at chapter 1, she wrote where she was when she started reading the book, and at the end of the final chapter, where she was when she finished it, and then sometimes on the back page, a small précis. How delightful that she left some of herself behind. If you pass this book on, I hope you've left a few pencil marks in it. In fact, why not also just put where you were when you started reading it, and I hope you finish reading it as well. And I hope if you do put a précis in it, it's one that is one of enjoyment. My friend Jeff told me of how sometimes when asked to sort through the books of avid collectors who've died, he is, by the end of the process of sorting them, a friend of someone that he never actually knew. Between the lines of Bibliomaniac is the story of how my father made me. And I'll give you a little footnote to this as well about Henry Williamson, which is when I was thinking about where am I going to distribute his books, who shall I give his books to, I was around at the comedian Stuart Lee's house and I noticed he had some Henry Williamson books. And I said, "Oh, Stu, do you want some Henry Williamson books? Because my dad's got loads." And he went, "No, I've not really finished reading these ones. I've read a few of them, but I just won't have time." Also, he was a bit of a Nazi. And then I got home and I wasn't certain. I thought he'd been through a bit of a Nazi phase. And then I opened this box which contained letters that had been sent to Henry Williamson that my dad must have bought at auction. And the top letter in that box was an invitation to tea from Oswald Mosley. So I rang up Stu and said, "Yeah, you're right, not a phase." Really hope you enjoyed that, and we've got loads of other new ideas coming up. We've got quite a few things that we've made already, and we've got plans to make a lot more things. And if you can help, it would be great if you could go to patreon.com/cosmicshambles to help fund all of our big ideas and some of our quite small ideas. And if you can't afford to, that's absolutely fine as well. Obviously, we want to make these things as free as possible for as many people as possible. But if you can subscribe, there'll probably be a subscribe thing there, or there. That will be fantastic as well.